I think we've been trying to work with the industry to get a sort of clear perspective on how we take 5G into a much more commercial oriented success model. So what we've done is work with some of the large telecom service providers, and in this case, this is China Mobile, to sort of understand some of the key 5G services that they would like to roll out with specific verticals. And in this case, we're going to be looking at two key verticals that we found very interesting as low-hanging fruit for 5G monetization. But it was also important that in considering 5G monetization, we also looked at how exactly IT was going to position itself to manage the operations around 5G. In creating the catalyst, we actually bundled the 5G operations with the 5G monetization to create that sort of complete IT enablement for 5G. So I would quickly introduce the key participants. We've got API Gate, that's basically presented or represented here by Venura from Apigate. Apigate is Venura is a CTO. And then also we had the Chinese Academy for ICT that was quite interested in how exactly we define specific 5G services and enable them, as well as a research support coming from the Beijing University of Post and Telecom, who was looking into how exactly is the industry verticals and going to work with service providers. So more or less from a research and point of view. And for Huawei, we focused on what can we offer by way of charging and billing solutions to enable truly commercialize your 5G slicing or indeed your 5G services. So this is just a quick outline about the catalyst formation. We've done a lot of back and forth when it comes to working with the different verticals and understanding what the vertical interest is for 5G. And of course, there's been a lot of research also supporting the different aspirations from the manufacturing sector, from the transport sector, from the cloud, the gaming sector, or the media and entertainment sector, and the utility sector, and as well many others. And we found out that the cloud gaming was one of the hot areas. Indeed, if you had all attended the keynote speech, it was one of the featured spaces for 5G. And why exactly is 5G important for cloud gaming is the overhead when it comes to having to manage decoding and coding these high graphics gaming design between your cloud data center and of course the handset. So that presented a very good opportunity for service providers to work with the media and entertainment sector, particularly the gaming sector in this case, and then offer solutions using 5G. The other part was working with the utility companies. And most of you that have worked with the utility companies would already appreciate the fact that in most cases, telcos have never enabled them in the sense that you would have a traditional utility company that's rolling out its own network in order to support the management of its infrastructure. Now, 5G presents a very good opportunity for service providers to actually create network solutions that fit the utility companies, and as a result of that, be able to indeed monetize the 5G network. So these are the two verticals that we saw as low-hanging fruit for telcos, and these also were the verticals that our champion found extremely important to understand the business models we could use to engage with such verticals, as well as the charging strategies that could apply. So without too much of a detail, we found out that there were 5G challenges, and indeed those challenges were creating an impact on IT. From a business point of view, from a standards point of view, and then also from an IT point of view. From the business point of view, we talk about the fact that 5G creates the opportunity to shift your traditional pipeline thinking to a platform thinking. So that was one significant area that had a very huge influence on how the service provider thought about their complete operating model. And then, of course, from an IT point of view, you are looking at the fact that we're talking a lot about the new technologies that indeed can enable the whole 5G era to happen in a much more smoother way. So how do you bring in technologies like AI? You're going to be provisioning a lot of massive machine type connectivity. You need to support ultra reliable latency connectivity within your network, and that cannot necessarily be handled completely by human beings. You need that augmentation from AI to be able to do that. Also the fact that blockchain itself presents also an opportunity that in managing relationship with your partners in a trustless way, you can definitely guarantee them those services that you claim to be delivering from a performance point of view back to service providers. So these were the changes from a 5G point of view that were impacting on IT, and we see that as critical for us to sort of address as part of the operating model to enable 5G. And then, of course, you also have the business thinking or the business model requirements, where it is traditionally telcos been using a usage-based model to charge or indeed to build business model relationships. And that basically cannot support the opportunity of gaining more profitability from 5G solutions. We talk a lot about slicing, but slicing itself would end up having an impact on network service providers in that slicing is itself a finite resource. It's not an infinite resource. So how do you indeed provision slicing solutions that bring you the best return for that investment? So again, we had to look at how exactly can we shift the usage-based model to new sort of models in charging. For instance, how do you bring in performance-based charging? How do you bring in event-based charging as part of the way to improve the opportunity to monetize your 5G service? So these were the things that we actually thought about, as well as from a standards point of view, how do we introduce some of the TMF open APIs, as well as use of the open digital architecture to help with the decoupling and then componentization of this whole framework. So I think that's more than half the time. Could we just get on with the details?
Let's get on with the panel.
Perfect. Thanks. Okay, I'll leave this there.
Okay.
Okay.
You can sit over
Okay,
there. I just
good.
don't want to crowd you. Okay, so thank you very much for that overview, Emmanuel. A lot of details there, and hopefully we'll dive into a little bit more detail from your project now. But first of all, let's do a couple of introductions. So, Venura, let's just a quick intro.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Venura Mendes. I'm the CTO of Apigate. So Apigate is Asiata Digital Services company. So we are actually a digital service provider all about enabling operators to deliver services to developer enterprises, gaming companies, etc. And I think later on we can talk a little bit more about what we've done in this catalyst. I'll hand over to Emmanuel.
Good. Great. My name is Emmanuel Autry. I'm Ghanaian, but I work with the folks out of China. So I work out of the headquarters of Huawei. I'm responsible for standards and industry development from a software point of view. So I work a lot with industry bodies, as in defining some of the key standards that are needed in the OSS, BSS area. Okay.
Great, thank you. So you talked a little bit about business models on event-based charging, on usage-based charging, and so on. And throughout yesterday, in particular, and a little bit this morning, we talked about the fact that in 5G, really innovative business models are required, and that we don't actually currently know what might be to come as the rollout is just starting. Can you tell us a little bit more about what 5G business models, what type of 5G business models you anticipate arriving, and what you had imagined indeed in your catalyst?
Right. Okay. So if we look at the case of the cloud gaming provider as an example, traditionally what would happen is that a service provider would say that, okay, you need a cloud gaming vendor or provider, interconnecting with them. And then at the end of the day, it's basically a flat settlement scheme that they arrange with such providers. On the other side, they would basically be looking at how exactly they then go ahead and then charge the customer on a flat usage basis. The way we are thinking of it is that the cloud gaming providers, and a lot of them, are looking to actually offer their services as part of the portfolio of the service provider. So rather than traditionally having the service provider just be a flat pipe, what's happening now is the service provider is actually getting these cloud gaming capabilities integrated as part of its platform model, and then offering that back to customers. So indeed, you're getting a game not from a cloud gaming vendor anymore. You're getting a game that's coming or being supplied by the service provider. That changes the model of the traditional thinking. Also, we're working with the utility company. We understand that a lot of the traditional thinking where you're saying that, okay, the utility company is just a partner that is perhaps consuming capability of your network. Is no more the traditional model that's being considered as part of the evolution in the business models. These players are now coming in also as part of your stakeholder network. And then the ability for you to offer services to them on a demand basis means that you're thinking around your traditional B2B to X or indeed B2B model is no more a unique offer for them. So indeed, looking at it from a platform point of view, you can then expose your network to them in a way that they can be onboarded and use the service when they want to use the service, as well as settle or charge when they have consumed the service. That sort of flexibility allows them the opportunity to indeed have a win-win relationship with you, and then for also service providers to be able to optimize those scarce resources that they've got within the environment. Yeah, so the way we look at business models, we shift from the thinking of it, in the traditional sense of B2B to X, to having to bring in the opportunities that happen in the typical OTT space, where you're looking at, for instance, sponsored data or reverse charging, or indeed providing some form of freemium-based services through the telcos network. It's not the traditional usage-based model anymore. Yeah. You want to add to that?
So quite a bit of experimentation still to come, I suppose. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
You want to add to that?
In terms of the solution actually that you guys developed for the Champion, for China Mobile, can you tell us a little bit more from an IT perspective around the service-based architecture, the API management, and so on? A little bit more about the solution.
Right. So the 5G network evolution adopts a new sort of architecture model. Typically, the network had been very rich with legacy protocols and having to do point-to-point sort of integration. The new standards with Release 16 positions 5G architecture as a service-based architecture, which is basically saying that it's service-oriented architecture plus microservices all framed together. The same model has been also adopted by TM Forum with regards to the open digital architecture, where you actually are looking at, first of all, you're using service-based interfaces, which is all RESTful, as a means to have the different components within your architecture be able to interact from an event point of view. So the ability to orchestrate services or deliver services is no more the hard coding that was the thought of the years before. And so that opportunity has been one of the key things we've considered as part of the solution stack, so that indeed what you're doing here is creating an agile commercial platform for service providers to be able to engage in a much more flexible way with the industry verticals.
Okay, great, thank you. And what has been the outcome for China Mobile specifically, the tangible outcomes?
Yeah, so China Mobile had this proof of concept developed in two key regions. One is Xiamen region, and then the other one I think is Hangzhou. I've forgotten the exact location, but the idea there was how exactly to grow the profitability of the infrastructure assets that they had. Typically, how exactly you measure that is the return on investment, or indeed the return on usage that you basically open to service providers or to customers. In that sense, I can perhaps speak in an approximated form. There was a 30% jump in the sort of profits that they were getting from these new 5G sort of services that were delivered. And the idea was, try to position the customer base of the service provider as assets that you could leverage to grow the potential of a cloud gaming developer. So a cloud gaming developer basically comes in and says that, okay, I would like to reach your subscriber base. The service provider says, yes, of course, I've got a huge subscriber base, and for you to gain access to them, we need to sit down and have this sort of settlement and commercial framework to enable that to happen. And that really drove a lot of value for the service provider. Yeah.
So win-win all around, new services, better services. I suppose that has an impact on clearly the customer experience, churn, etc.
Absolutely.
So it's got a very broad base of monetization, it seems.
Yeah, because the cloud gaming vendor is looking to to deliver better experience to the customer. And by delivering better experience to customer, you have the opportunity to also have that stickiness from the customer point of view. And from the service provider point of view, it's the ability to improve the ARPU, and improve the ARPU without much effort. In other words, to translate that to profitability. So that created a win-win definitely for both sides.
Yeah, and when you have close to 1 billion subscribers, I suppose that goes quite quickly.
Sorry, I'm just going to add a point on that. I think what Emmanuel was talking about earlier was that we've exposed very sophisticated capability to third parties. The cloud gaming provider, for example, to be able to invoke specific services on behalf of a user. So that's actually created a better user experience and a better user experience for the end user, and at the same time for the gaming provider, additional source of revenue and also a better gaming experience. But at the same time, this is a B2B2C scenario where China Mobile has to think about the end customer and ensuring that they maintain or provide the right level of consent, authorization, traceability to when these services get invoked. Because at the end of the day, these are open APIs. So the identity layer that we provided actually brings industry standards in the form of OAuth and OpenID Connect and even the TM Forum federated identity services to be able to provide a seamless experience so the user can still provide the authorization without going to other screens, without doing the out-of-band things that they would normally do. But at the same time, the CSP is confident that the end user has given consent and that is tracked and audited in the appropriate fashion. Mm-hmm. So I think that is very important part of ensuring that B2B2C relationship is properly delivered, and end of the day, the CSP's end customers are still protected.
Yeah, it's a good example of an ecosystem business scenario, right? Where in this instance, China Mobile still owns the relationship with the end user. So talking about ecosystems and partners, in this catalyst specifically, how did that dynamic work? Tell us about how the different participants worked together, what they contributed, and your experience as a team in this catalyst project.
You start first.
Okay, so I think it was, so we've been, for me personally, it was the first experience working with China Mobile. So there were interesting language challenges, but I actually, at an engineering level, when you come down to it, you're trying to solve problems. So that was always good to have a common problem to solve. And from my perspective, coming from the Appigate view of the world, we were looking at new opportunities where we could enable more than just payment, A to B messaging, communications, which is our current suite of services. So it was very good to get some actual real use cases, practical use cases of how this was done and how we could see the market evolving.
Okay, well, yes, from our side, it was about picking the right, the right use cases, because it's quite easy for anyone to talk about slicing, use of slices in a very fancy, way. We've heard of a lot of fancy stuff about use of slices, but the key point at the end of the day is that how do you, again, slicing is not necessarily the end goal. The end goal is how do I monetize that asset that I've basically provisioned to that vertical. And of course, the ability to have the different parties sit together and then forge that win-win relationship was paramount to make this a success. Without that, all the technology stuff is very easy to do. But the commercialization of that in a way that creates a sustained business model is practically the only way that makes this a viable venture eventually.
That's fantastic. So you'd recommend the Catalyst experience, right?
The Catalyst experience was certainly a marvelous thing. Yeah.
Great. So you were saying there's a lot of promise out here, right? The technology's there. We're just starting 5G rollout now. There's still a lot of innovation to come, a lot of experimentation. There'll be some hit and miss. So are you guys going to carry on this Catalyst? Are you going to do another phase? And if so, what can we expect from you?
Yeah, the Catalyst certainly has opened the Pandora's box. That's the way I put it. Yeah, it's created the mind awareness that the topic should become centered to the whole discussion around 5G. Now, most of you that have seen the evolution of mobile networks from 2G, 3G, 4G. Also, how exactly we did. What we did was, after the network was built, we started thinking about how do we commercialize it. With 5G, we think that we should do it the other way around. As we're doing all these proof of concept regarding slicing and all that, we need to start thinking also about how do we truly commercialize these solutions. So certainly, what we've just done now is do 2 use cases for 2 key verticals. We need to explore all the others and then identify the potential means to truly monetize these use cases. Again, from this use case, we added 3 more vectors to charging, which were traditionally not the case. We would like to explore some other vectors that could be very critical to actually enable those business models sync eventually. Yeah. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I think just to say, yes, definitely second phase would be very interesting. And I think what would act interesting dimension to this is, for example, if you take the cloud gaming provider, if they're actually going to launch a service in country or in region, it'll have to be multi-operator. So you're actually then starting to bridge between 2 ecosystems. And I think that is definitely something we're very keen to explore with potentially one of our other customers also who we could try to bring into this.
Okay, great. So there's room for more on this team. So if you have ideas, you want to experiment in a safe, neutral environment, it's also good if it's your first Catalyst experience to join an existing team. These guys would recommend it. I think that if you've been at the theater yesterday and the day before, I think it's an all-round common statement from everyone. So do get in touch with these guys. Visit them at their booth a little further along on this floor. And join me in thanking them for this discussion. Thank you.